Yes, and for those of you keeping track at home, that does earn you a copyright strike each and every time I run it on a Saturday.
Claim.
A claim.
They're different. They're not as bad.
Yeah, I get up every morning, every Sunday morning.
Yep.
I check my mail. There it is. I say, mute the clip.
I get the same thing for Cheers.
I
It's
was
fine.
I
Doesn't
was
matter.
wondering what you do with that because I hadn't.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's like you can't monetize it. Oh well, boo-hoo. I
Yeah,
don't monetize any of my streams, and I'm losing a whopping $3.75 a year because
I
of
was
that decision.
I was gonna say I monetize all my streams, and they don't pay until you've cashed in $100. So I should get something around 2025 at the rate I'm going.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Much better to have some entertaining content for your streams, I think.
exactly. This is by the way, folks in chat, this is usually what we call the LCS Guys show. We have a host of different LCS owners that come on and talk about what's going on in the industry over the past couple of weeks. Today just seems to be a weird day where none of them are able to make it. But I had Michael Bancroft coming on. That's sort of like saying, hey Elvis, can you play next week because the janitors are on strike?
Well, I'll take that. I'll take that. Thank you.
So we're here. Gosh, you've had the obviously quite well known for your work on the Lucent, um, and I need to know more about that book. I mean, you were 100% the entire team on that book, correct?
Initially, I was. That was kind of a silly decision for me to do. It's very slow going. Also, there's no one there to sort of check your homework. But yes, when I launched it, even the campaign, I was the writer, the artist. When I say artist, that's everything: line art,
Yeah.
coloring, whatever. Doing all the layout, obviously, and letterer. So the first one to go was the letterer, because Joe and I initially there was no editor, so I brought Joe in late in the game, which was one of the biggest reasons why the book took so much longer to bring out. But that was the best decision I ever made. Joe and I were struggling with the lettering, and it was because I was sort of stuck with this European style. We threw that away, brought on Eric Weathers. Joe obviously came in. He was the story editor, copy editor, and art editor. And yeah, so now moving forward, I'm going to probably be in the next book hiring a coloring assistant. So
It's a lot of work to take on for one guy,
it's a lot of work.
especially for a color book.
Mm.
So I have, amazingly enough, tonight I have a very sexy chat. I don't know how that is. But we have Clown World says, watching Bancroft on a stream at a normal time is going to be strange. NTN Comics says, hail the chat. And Bancroft needs a fancy intro like this for his show. Well, there's a very special tool I use called PowerPoint that makes all my intro videos.
Well, I'll make sure I have to check that out.
It's hard to find. Hail President Xenu and hail Princess Xena, our only true saviors. Thank you, Robert Roberts. Appreciate that. Tense Webs is here. And Don Chin is in the house. Is it hot in here? Is it just me? Well, the hot seat is the one I'm sitting in. So I was curious. Yeah, it's I got a brand new, you can't see it. I got tired of sitting in that folding chair. I didn't get tired of sitting in it. I got tired of standing up from it and going, ow! Because I'm old. So I kicked it. I bought myself. I bought myself an office chair, man. I'm curious because, I do interviews with people. We've talked with people who make comics in Japan and what the comics were like there. And obviously, the whole manga scene and everything. And I talk with the CG UK guys, and we talk about, hey, 2000 AD was a thing, and, Robot Archie and all that stuff. I don't know anything about the comic book scene in Australia, if there even is one.
Depends on what you're asking there. Are you asking about sort of a convention working scene? There apparently is one. I don't really know about it. I didn't get involved in it. Like, an indie scene. Is there a scene where lots of people are working on comics? I don't think so. Or there may be more now because everything's gone online. But traditionally, as we've known it to be, let's go back to when I got into comics, the early 90s. No, I would imagine everyone is traveling over to the States to get into comics. To
So,
either be a
there's no
writer,
publisher
artist,
there.
or anything like that. There were some small publishers, very indie stuff. I did support them back in the day. I have the entire run of Bug and Stump. I think it's
Okay.
about 6 issues. But yeah, very few, very few. There's actually quite a few indie books that do come out of Australia, CG notwithstanding. The Bogan Barbarian is one of them that is sort of like a comedy zombie book. But other than that, just imagine what's a state in the States with 25 million people in it?
Uh,
Mm,
New York, at least
there you
easily.
go. So that's sort of, I guess, like if you stretch New York out to the size of the whole United States, that's sort of like what it's like. So you get a handful of hubs, but in the major cities, well, I live in Melbourne, which is the second biggest city. Yeah, there's comic book shops everywhere. Don't listen to Rob Arnold, anyone. We have always had comics here. You could go into what we call news agencies, which are, they've changed a lot over the years, but back in the day, at least, you could buy all the Marvel and DC books. We do have comic book shops that look exactly the same to me as to what you guys have in the States. Some of them are more focused on back issues. Some of them are more focused on toys and merch and stuff. All of them carry new comics, so much as they're being put out. And yeah, I was into Marvel. I didn't really care about the DC stuff, but there was always DC, that Batman and Superman and Flash and the Lanterns. They were all available.
Yeah.
But I don't really get into the cons or anything like that, but they do happen. We have comic conventions.
Yeah, I grew up as a DC kid, but I'm a lot older than you, so the Marvel stuff that was speaking to the older readers was over my head at the time. I was still, how was I reading comics? I was reading comics in the early 70s. I started reading at 4 years old, and nobody knew I could do it because I thought everybody could, so I didn't make a thing out of it. But yeah, I was spoiled because I grew up in Sparta, Illinois, in the center of the country, where there were no comic shops, no comics sold at stores, and there didn't need to be because every comic book in the world was printed there at World Color Press. So everybody just put home print overruns. After work, hey, grab a stack of these, take them home to the kids. And there were people just rooms full of comic books. You just went over and raided your friend's house.
That was when I got into I got into comics because my friends got into comics, and I jump on the bike, ride down to the local news agency, which is a 1-minute bike ride away. What I would do is I would walk to school so I could save up my bus money, and that would get me about $1.30 a day. 20 days out of the month, I'd have a stack of coins that I could get. I don't remember how much comics cost back then, maybe $1.50, $2 or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would come home with a stack of mostly Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, because that was the era of Image had just started. So we're getting the tail end of Jim Lee stuff, and then started getting into McFarlane, Spawn, and stuff like that. So that was when I kind of came into it all.
Yeah, Robert Roberts is kind of touching on what I was asking earlier. This is what I was trying to get to. Australia doesn't have its own publishers. They don't have an Alpha Flight equivalent at Marvel, as far as I know, or Captain Britain. Yeah, well, they've got what, Dreamweaver or whatever his name is, that Abo, who still lets the X-Men travel through the world. He spins his didgeridoo, and they can. That was again Jim Lee era. That's what did they call that? There was a name for it, and it was like the X-Men's teleportation device. but there was just this Aborigine mutant. He didn't talk. He just sat cross-legged on a cliff, and he'd spin his thing, and this portal would open, and they just step through it and go where they were going.
The sort of the Crocodile Dundee just created this kind of fascination with that sort of stuff, Aboriginal culture, and that kind of outback Australian character, which does exist, but it's incredibly rare. It's sort of probably as common as a kind of an outdoorsman living out in his cabin in the woods by himself in the States somewhere. It's not really, I mean, it's quintessentially American, but it's not very common in the same way that the Steve Irwin Crocodile Dundee character is quintessentially Australian, but how many of them actually out there? You could probably count them on one hand.
I just got to watch all three of those movies, and I didn't know there were three. They could have stopped at two, but I just got to watch them again because they re-released them for an anniversary on Blu-ray, and they were still fun because it was like this was a guy who knew what he was doing physically when it came to stuff because he was an outdoorsman, but he never took himself seriously, and when he screwed something up, he just kind of went with it and like he meant to do that, and everything worked out in the end. He wasn't a joke, even though he was in funny situations.
Yeah, I've watched 1 and 2. I forgot there was a third one.
Yeah,
pretty recently. I think they hold up. I like it. I like that they're a little bit of that Australiana out there in the world. But no, I'm not familiar with the X-Men take on an Aboriginal mutant. Well, I'm glad to hear there is one.
There is one. Yeah, I think all the United States knows about Australia came from that 3-year expanse of 2 Crocodile Dundee movies and The Gods Must Be Crazy, and that's it. That's
Gods Must Be Crazy. No, that's South Africa.
That's South Africa. I thought that was an Aboriginal.
No. They're
check that out again.
They were Kalahari Bushmen.
That's where the memory goes when you get older, Michael. It's
very different, actually. Yeah. The Aboriginal Australian genetically has very little to do with the African black man. Like the closest, they have the most. If you know what a Denisovian is, the most Denisovian DNA. It's a sub branch that eventually died off. So the Europeans have the most Neanderthal DNA out of anyone still living.
Right.
The Aboriginal Australians have the most Denisovian DNA. And I think they're most closely related to the South American that you might find, the native that live in the Amazons, anything like that, which is very unusual because it's on the other side of the Pacific. So,
yeah, you start wondering, how did people get from here to there? And
well, we're talking, I think the Aboriginals, they don't exactly know. They arrived in Australia somewhere between 60 to 200,000 years ago. So,
yeah, they got there somehow. Thor Heyerdahl proved you can do it in a kayak. So back to comics, though. Somewhere along the line, you decided that these little pamphlets that nobody in Australia was publishing was something you wanted to try to get into and try your hand at. When did that happen? Was it when crowdfunding happened, or was it longer ago than that?
I don't know the exact date, but it was mid to late 2014, and by that point, the fact that no one was making them in Australia was sort of irrelevant. People were making them online.
Yeah.
So that was kind of it. I had already been writing a story for a long time. And when I say writing a story, I was actually more just, I had a story and I was practicing writing. It wasn't really a novel. I didn't have chapters. It was just, I had a story and I was just writing it. And, I wrote about 150,000 odd words of it. And none of that will see the light of day because it was all just learning about writing and creating characters and a narrative and all that sort of stuff. I could never really get it to work, though. I thought, maybe it could be a novel, but every time I tried, it just, something wasn't clicking. And I was starting to get back into, I was already reading some like Star Wars comics and stuff like that, because I didn't want to jump back into Spider-Man or anything like that. I wanted to just jump into something I could pick up and put down. I knew all the characters straight away. I didn't have to go back and read back issues. You can just jump right into a Darth Vader comic, super easy.
Absolutely.
And that was what I was into. But then I'd started catching the French books were catching my mind, the bande dessinées, the big albums, because they are just so cool. They're so different to anything that I'd read before that came out of Western corporate comics or even indie comics. And that's when I picked up a book and I opened it, and the page, it was this big cityscape, and I saw my story, which back then was called The Woken. It wasn't called The Loosened. I had to change the name because
we're so glad you did.
Well, eventually woke became a thing, because when I first wrote it, woke wasn't a thing, that didn't exist. And I remember hearing that term starting to be used. I'm like, God, I hope that doesn't take off. But luckily it changed to Loosen, which is actually a better name, more fitting. And so I saw my story and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's comics like this. This could be my story. And the gears started turning, but I'm like, well, how am I going to draw it? I've never drawn a comic book before. I know how to make art.
Okay.
But I'd never drawn characters, faces, all that sort of stuff. So I do what you do in 2014. You jump onto YouTube and how do you draw heads, faces, hands, bodies? So I just started devouring that stuff. Spent about 3 months on that, and then I was like, oh, screw this. I'm just going to jump into it and learn as I go. And that, that's the first part of the Lucent Waking Dream.
Now,
me learning how to draw.
That's fascinating to me, because as much as we've joked about ginger root hands and things like that, the fact that you're drawing at that level with just jumping in and learning, I was going to ask, I mean, are you like a graphic designer in your day job or some sort?
I am a graphic designer in my day job.
Okay, so you've got some skills that you had a head start.
Exactly. I didn't just pick up a pen for the first time in 2014, and I'd always been artistic. I had never really stopped making art, but nothing like comic book art. I was making t-shirt art, sort of art for myself that I was selling on Etsy, stuff like that. I was fairly successful in the t-shirt design. And what I found when I started that is I could really just pick up any style, like a bit like a style thief, like a chameleon. Whatever I saw, with a bit of practice, I could replicate pretty well, whatever style. So that's what I did. I just took this style that this guy is French artist. I said, okay, well, how does he draw? So for the first, 6 months, I would have his book next to me. So I'd always be flipping through it. Like, okay, how does he draw, an angry face from that? And just sort of copy it. And the good thing about it is, I find like you can't really copy a style really 100%. You can actually probably only copy it around about 50 or 60%, because your innate hand and eye will start to go into it. And then eventually, 6 months in, I started noticing that I hadn't opened the book in weeks. And what I was actually copying was my own style. So now I'm copying my own style, and now, it's more, 80 or 90% all me. And now I look at it and I look at my newest stuff that I've drawn and look at his stuff, and it's completely different.
Yeah, because you evolved into your own style.
Exactly. I liken it more to, you start when you learn a martial art, you're completely trying to copy your teacher, but eventually your body knows how to move, and now you're just sort of referencing yourself. And that's how, and that whole process took about a year and a half. That landed me in around about 2016, and I was pumping out pages constantly, and that's how I got into it. And at the time, like I said, there's nowhere that I knew of in Australia where I could kind of sell this thing or show this thing. So to me, it was all webtoons. It was all web comics, tapas and webtoons. That's what I was putting it out on, because where else could I do it?
Yeah, I hear that. I get the whole, copying somebody else's style that you want to emulate. When I was first writing short stories, I would sit down and read 2 or 3 Sandman comics just to get a patois in my head, a rhythm, a voice. And even now I show this. Sometimes I write the Destroyer series with the Remo Williams. I'll go out and dig up some of the very earliest books and read it so that I get, the way Remo talks, the way Master Chun talks, as I get those voices going back again in my head. But I use their voices, but they still say what I want them to say now, things that I think are funny, things that I think are sarcastic. John Chin has asked, did you go to school for graphic design?
I did. I went to, I was at, we call it university. Well, I did what we also call TAFE, which is sort of a kind of like trade school. So I did a trade school thing for graphic artistry. I did that for a year. That got me into university, which is the equivalent of college. And I did that for 4 years. And so the last year, half of that year I spent in Germany. That's where I met my wife, Mel. And then pretty much jumped straight into graphic design. I think I got a job maybe a month after I graduated, got my first job, and have been working ever since professionally as a graphic designer. That was in 2004. I graduated.
It speeds right by.
It certainly does.
There are times I think I just graduated a couple of days ago, and I'm like, no, that was like 40 years.
It's been good to me. I'm not saying, I probably would rather now at this point, if it were possible, just entirely focus on comic books, because it's become such a big part of my life. But baby steps on that front. We'll see.
All right. Well, speaking of comic books, I want to take a bit of a brief moment here and run this video and talk about something else that's going on here. This is an auction that's happening this weekend for Luke Stone, who is, of course, the fellow behind Hybrids, the Sons of Gods. He caught COVID in a major way. 2 months in a coma, medically induced coma, while he was on a ventilator. He is, out of that now, but struggling with some expenses. So I want to play this and draw some attention to the auction that's going on, put on by Meredith Loughran, and well, she'll tell you about it right here.
Hey guys, this is Meredith Loughran at Ragin' AVC. We're organizing an art and swag bag auction to help one of our fellow indie creators and his family after a near-death experience with COVID-19. After months in the ICU under a drug-induced coma, our good friend Luke Stone is in a rehabilitation facility. He and his family need your help with continued thoughts and prayers, but also to help make ends meet. My personal connection with Luke is through friendship, but he's also the person who gave me my very first comic book writing credit in Hybrids, the Sons of Gods trade paperback, Trash Day. This special live stream event is scheduled for November 13th and 14th, and we'll be updating our website with a catalog of items up for auction. If you wish to donate art, books, or a goodie bag, contact Nita Lanning or me at raginabc@gmail.com. Please share this out with your friends and help spread the word. As a community, we might not be able to help everyone, but we can try, one person at a time.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. My name's Luke Stone. I'm the writer and artist behind Hybrids. First, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has supported this project over the years and who has been along the journey with me. You see, the very first time that I really ever wrote a script was Hybrids 1, and the first time I really did any kind of digital art was with Hybrids 1 and some of the concept art for that. But hopefully you will enjoy the journey of this story as I grew not only as a writer and an artist, but also as an individual in my in my own life in all aspects, because it definitely was a journey, and some of those things found their way into the pages of this story. I've tried to put a little piece of myself in all of it, and I've tried to put a little piece of all the people that I've been able to meet along my own personal journey in it as well, so that there's something there for everybody to connect with. thank you again for making it to the end of this video. And I look forward to not only just being able to give you the story, but also to meet you one day, hopefully in person, or at least through some kind of contact where we can share kind of our love for comics and our love for the medium. So have a great day and God bless you.
And I have the link at the top of the chat pinned up there. If anybody wants to check that out, it'll open in a new window. They're not doing like the art auctions that we see on streams a lot, Michael. They're doing more of an eBay auction where they're like, here's a Facebook post for this item, and everybody's just kind of bidding in the comments. So, So do check it out. There's some good stuff over there.
Yeah, it's pretty tragic to hear what's happened with Luke. Obviously I don't know his personal situation, but just some people catch this thing and skate on by, no problems. I know my editor Joe as well. He also came very close to death. Thankfully, he didn't have to be intubated. It's very shocking what's happened to Luke. I went back and checked. He's actually one of the guys who we've had most on my show. He's got
really?
the 5-time appearance award, and just a great guy. Always great to hang out with. Super nice, and obviously hoping for a speedy recovery. It doesn't look like it's on the cards for him, but
well, at least it is a recovery. And, it doesn't matter what you go in the hospital for. When you hear 2 months and plus, you can just hear the cha-ching going on in the background. It's going to be financially devastating. So this tiny little bit. And this highlights one of the things that I really do like about this community of Comicsgate and crowdfunded folks is that as much as everybody's competing with each other on different projects, they're supporting each other as well. The group comes together when there's a need to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the competitive side of it is very fun, and we have a lot of internet fun around that stuff. That's kind of the gamification side of things, with the crowd funds and whose book is better received and all that sort of stuff, who's doing the best artwork, all that sort of stuff. I think that's all good, healthy kind of machismo, and it's fun for backers and readers to get involved in all that. When it comes to the actual network community kind of group, people hanging out, people forming friendship cliques and everything, it's only having been involved in webcomics before, I can say there was nothing like that there. But I've heard people have come from the mainstream, people have come from indie comics, that they've never found anything that even resembles what's going on specifically in Comicsgate in terms of support and friendship and just people helping each other out, with whatever's needed. And this is one of those instances where something is really seriously needed.
I'd like to see this auction really take off, and spread to some of the people in Comicsgate who can actually make an impact with their voice, and with donation of artwork and stuff. I know Don Chin has sent in some artwork from Bill Mouse from the Beardzerker, so there's some original Beardzerker art in there. I've done what little I could. I know the Rabbi is working through me because he Rabbi's V. He used our fulfillment service, so we had some spares, and he said, "Hey, put a kit together and make it a donation. I'll pay the postage." I said, "No, I'll put a kit together and I'll pay the postage." It's least we can do. But there is getting back to the making of the comics. There's a good handful of folks coming out of Australia who are more talented than the majority of people I see making comics in the U.S. I'm talking about yourself. I'm talking about Rob Arnold's Replicators, Kemosabe's work with the Company Men, very, very 90s kind of image book. And it's a very American thing to say to somebody in another country, because we we like, America, and here's the other country. Like, you can walk across the block and say hi to all these other people, surely. But is there any thoughts ever about, some sort of a convention of the creators of, in Australia coming together and doing something?
Not a convention. I don't know if we're big enough for that. We're certainly very spread out as well. Something that always shocks people when they come here is just how really alone we are in our cities. It's very remote, even within Australia. So when you talk about, say, Kemosabe, I think he's up in New South Wales. He's on the, I guess it's sort of like the distance between I don't know, Florida and New York or something, but there's nothing in between. And Rob is in the same city as me. Dean James is in the same city as me. There's a bunch of people spread out, but like Rob and I and the Barton brothers, we have met, but it was as a very informal. I think it was for Clayton's birthday or something like that. Rob and I plan to meet up again, and we remember we only just came out of lockdown too.
Yeah,
so we're only just allowed to meet up again now.
We're pretty sure that Australia over here, we watch Escape from New York, and we're looking at that and like, yeah, that's Australia right now, man.
Yeah, it's been rough, but look, I don't know. I mean, there are comic book conventions here, for indie stuff or mainstream stuff or whatever. I just don't personally. I don't see a whole bunch of benefit for me yet. Because I've only got one book. Sure. If I had maybe 3 books and a good decent amount of story to tell and show off to potentially new customers, that would be something a bit more enticing for me. But with just the one book, which is sort of an introduction to the Lucent, I'm happy to kind of keep that online for the moment and just not bite off more than I can chew. I'm already pretty overextended as it is, with a whole bunch of different stuff that I'm involved in. So, it's sort of a wait and see kind of thing for me.
Yeah, with one book, I totally get that. When I had just one book and I was at a convention at a table, it was pathetic looking, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, especially, I've seen some people out there, they've got their own imprints and they've released dozens.
Yes.
So it's, yeah, I'm patient. I'm not going anywhere. We'll just take it one day at a time.
Any thought to doing some sort of, and I think this is where I was trying to ask when I said conventions, but any thought of doing something like a jam book of everybody, like Bogan the comic or something? Because quite honestly, you got a lot to make up for with Tom Taylor and everything he's doing.
Not really, and I've sort of shied away from kind of CGAU or something like that. It's not something I really want to get terribly involved in. Like, I understand the need for it over in the UK. It's more of a time zone thing there. They kind of have to band together because all of their live streams are at a really weird time for everyone else in the world. So they've become kind of a club. Australia, strangely enough, our afternoon and evening is actually peak kind of Comicsgate online time, which for some reason seems to be in the evening going on into the early morning. So it kind of works to be in Australia and in CG. So I just kind of think of it like that. I got into comics through the internet. I got into making comics through the internet. So to me, the internet is the place where there's no real time frame. There's no real borders. Everyone is just on the net. So some of us have funny accents and eat funny foods and say funny things, and but we're all just part of one big internet family of independent comic creators. That's how I see it, anyway.
Yeah, I used to not have the ear for it, but now I do, where I can distinguish the British accent from the Australian accent. And I was telling you the other night on your stream that I was giving blood, and the doctor or I don't know, practicing physician, whatever, who was putting the needle in, definitely an Australian accent. And I just looked at him and said, "Do you miss Golden Gay time?" and his eyes lit up. He's like, "Oh, you tell somebody around here you want a Golden Gay time, and they think something entirely different. But wow, that takes me back to my childhood."
Oh man, they're so good. It's good that you can pick it, because if you have an accent like mine, which is very general, it's not very strong in terms of Australian accent. Like, there's people here that really talk like this. How you go? And it's very drawly. And then in England, in London, you can also get people like, "How you going, governor?" Like that. We talk like this, and so that they're quite different. But in the middle, my accent and a normal Londoner is actually very similar. And I when I visited London, very few people kind of noticed. And I would catch myself thinking, "Are they Australian? No, this is the London accent. It's just quite similar." So it's good that you've got that ear for that.
B-Rose says that he would not have known about the existence of fairy bread without Bancroft. I wouldn't have known about the existence of Vegemite without Men at Work. And from what I was told, it's something you don't want to eat.
It's one of those things I think you've got to get into young. It never took for me, but
acquired taste.
People do like it.
So going into the Lucent, how big of a story is this in your head? I mean, is this like, hey, I've got the first of 3 chapters done, or I have the first of an ongoing epic done?
I always liken it to Star Wars, because, and this was never intentional. I grew up a really big fan of Star Wars, but it was never intentional. When I started writing the story, I had a single premise, and I don't even know if I want to give away the premise, because it might be too revealing. It is a mystery, primarily. I like to call it like a puzzle. So in Star Wars, I'm talking the first Star, the original. I'm talking the other,
the real one.
The real one. Luke Skywalker, finds out his lineage, and is thrust into the journey, faces Darth Vader and the Emperor, and becomes a Jedi and fulfills death, all that sort of stuff. That's sort of what I've got for my character Ella. Now, like Star Wars, though, to make it all meaningful and fun, there's got to be a world that it exists in. And every character sort of comes from different parts of that world. So there's things ticking in my mind. I've got one extra story written, as in scripted, a comic, like a one shot. I've got others that I've conceptualized, but I haven't actually written. So I've got this main story arc with Ella can go on for many years, and it will, and that'll eventually, like with Luke Skywalker, come to an end, a conclusion. But along the way, the world will be built out, and that can go in any direction, and have a lot of fun with that. But essentially, it's set in our world, but it's kind of like a what if our world. What if this premise were the case in our world? What would that world look like? And it spans all the way back thousands to thousands of years. The Waking Dream begins about 6,000 years ago. So we've got a whole history that we can play in. It's very exciting for me. So
you've mentioned this waking dream before, and that's sort of what lucent means. A lucid dream is the term for when you realize you're dreaming, and then you can kind of take control of it.
That is actually a happy accident. That's why I was so happy that I was forced to change the word. So lucid means you are aware that you are dreaming. That is very important for this world that I'm creating. It's a key element of the powers that you see in it, and powers, obviously, abilities, I should say. Abilities give certain individuals more power in the world. That's pretty much the situation that it's been set up. But lucent, the word lucent does not necessarily mean lucid. Actually, the meaning of the word lucent means to shine, something that glows.
Yeah,
And
with, the root
that's
word Lux.
actually, what's that, sorry?
With the root word lux for light, the Latin
Yes,
word.
so they're related. Exactly, they're related. They're light knowledge. That's a related thing, but also it does have a separate meaning, which is part of the mystery of the whole story here. It's kind of a running joke now because I have been very mysterious with it, and the book is, like I said, written like a puzzle. I've only given you the first few pieces of a puzzle. What is the lucent? Who are the lucent? Why is the lucent? All that sort of stuff.
And speaking of puzzles, of course, you were probably the first person to actually include puzzles as a stretch goal in your comics, which was a unique add-on. Nobody had thought of that before.
I've been taught. I love puzzles. We do puzzles as a family. We have a bunch of puzzles. I'd printed puzzles of my artwork before, custom things, and that's a lot of fun. And I thought, yeah, why isn't anyone doing this? So I talked about it on the streams, and most people poo-pooed it because they're like, oh, puzzles, that's grandpa and grandma stuff. But some people also said they really like it. I found a way to make it essentially without losing any money. You don't make any money, but you don't lose any money. So that's important.
That you can ask for.
So I thought, why not give it as an option if someone wants it? And then it just fits so well. And also, I'm always looking for new ways to have content out there, something fun. I knew I could create a fun little trailer for it. I could share it around. I could even create a hashtag Puzzlegate. Just have fun with it. We're making comics. We've got to have fun with the way we promote comics as well. So it was just you always got to be on the lookout for new ways to put content out there. That's what that.
Yeah, because just saying that you have a comic book, that's not enough anymore. Saying you have a sugary cereal is not enough. There's got to be a toy at the bottom of the box.
Exactly. There's so many indie books out there right now, and there's incredible indie books. You've got to find a way to keep the people interested in what you're doing.
Yes, and if not telling you how to do your business, because that's up to you, but if for some chance the puzzle provides a clue to the puzzle of the next book, that's
oh my goodness, that's meta. Now you've got me thinking, because I do want to include a puzzle on my next campaign, but now you've got me really thinking.
We'll see what triggers that thought was. I used to be I told you I was a big DC fan, and I loved The Brave and the Bold. The Batman and mystery hero. It was somebody different every issue. Batman and somebody else. And there wasn't Previews magazine, and there was no direct market. So it wasn't like, I know the books for the next 3 months, what's coming out. So they would do things in the book where there'd be an Easter egg and be like, Batman and Wonder Woman walking out of an alley after beating some guys up. And in a trash can, there'd be a green arrow sticking up from the trash. That was your hint that next month was going to be a team up with Green Arrow.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Give them something to look for and play with. Don says he has a lucent puzzle from Latvia, and he also had a question about how you came up with the concept of traveling through water.
How am I going to answer this? is a real tricky thing. I've given away a lot of clues as to the sort of source of the abilities in the lucent. Some of it I've been a little bit on the nose. Some of it has been incredibly subtle that I would be surprised if anyone picked up on anything. But essentially, I have a character in there who, yes, he has this ability with water. I showed him off on one of the prints. He's sort of like, swirling it around, he's manipulating it. And these characters, there's certain characters in the lucent who have this, I always think of abilities as like playing a sport. We've all played basketball.
Right.
Some of us can, dribble a little bit. We can't really take our eyes off the ball, and maybe we can get get it in the hoop once every 10 shots or something. But then there's other people out there who are Michael Jordan. That's how it works in the Lucent. So a guy like that has mastered skill to such an extreme degree that he's almost got a kind of a godlike power. And the one of these powers that this guy has is he has the power not only to travel through water, but to take others through water. How I came up with it, it was just an extension of me. I'll tell you, actually, I mean, I don't think this gives away too much. A lot of the abilities, a lot of what happens in the Lucent, a lot of what people are capable of stems from my own experiments in lucid dreams of what I found that I could do. Now, I'm not saying I travel through water in my dreams or anything, but you sort of experiment with things and play around with things, and then that gets the ball rolling. There's also a guy who's he's made of lava and stuff like that, and there'll be that'll be explored going forward as well. Ella has her own abilities that she's only just hinted at what she's going to be capable of. So I think it's all just you start with what's the at the heart of the character, what's the source of their abilities and powers, and then you expand out. And if you would take this to the absolute extreme, like how good could they get with this ability? What could they do with it? There's got to be at least a couple of characters that sort of reach that level. And that's how I kind of came into that.
But at the end of it all, their ability is within a dream. It's not a real ability, or is it?
That is the question. That is the question. Look, I will say, everything that happened in Waking Dream, in the scene it's lit very blue. It's all. I should have had a copy here. Hold on a second. Here we go. Everything that happens in this scene. There.
I see it.
It goes for about 12 pages. We're introduced to Ella as a young girl. We're introduced to her father, who ends up getting killed. We're introduced to the bad guy, Le Marechal, this guy here. Everything that happens in this sequence happened. That's real. That happened in the real world.
Is the blue coloring sort of a visual cue to where you're at?
The blue coloring was a bit of a choice that I made. Now, I also like to kind of keep people guessing. Is this a dream? Is this real? Why is it all colored like that? It is a flashback as well. So it's set 14 years ago. And then straight after that, it goes from this page here, which is all blue, to this page here, which is full colored. So I wanted that to be stark, like maximum contrast. This is 14 years ago, and strangely enough, and now I hope I'm not giving away spoilers. This is a dream. This is set inside a dream. What do I say on the back? I say, when the barrier between dreams and realities blur. That's kind of the that alludes to the original premise that I spoke on earlier, which was, what if, and I don't know if I want to continue that sentence because that's the underpinning of the entire thing and pretty much underpins all the mystery in the Lucent. But that line between dreams and reality blurring, that's what it's all about, baby. That's the Lucent.
And I'm kind of reminded of the scene in Alice Through the Looking Glass, or Through the Looking Glass, and what Alice found there, where the Red King is sleeping, and we're all a thing in his dream. I'm wondering now: is this some sort of massive shared dream, or is this one person's dream that people are bleeding over into? And you probably have the answer for that way down
I
the
do.
line.
I do have the answer to that. Can you go full screen again?
I can and
I
will.
like that you just referenced Through the Looking Glass, because this is another thing I really like to do. Where's my finger? Right there. I don't know if you can make that out.
Oh, yes.
Right behind them, the poster. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. That's something that I like to do in my books, to just sort of set the tone. You may not notice it, but you may notice it and not really read it, because that's a background element. I'm not supposed to actually read that, but it might sink in and just sort of put you in a state of mind, like what kind of story is, what's happening here? Well, hang on, why is there a Alice Through the Looking Glass poster right behind them when they're talking in that scene about a strange guy who visits her in her dreams, and she's having, like, is this a dream? What's going on? And that's I love that stuff. I've always loved that stuff.
I would have definitely caught that Easter egg. I'm a huge Lewis Carroll fan. My first book was Alice's Journey Beyond the Moon, that got published by Telos in the UK. So any Alice reference anywhere, I'm like, my ears perk up like the White Rabbit. I'm like, oh, I saw that. Meanwhile, Fear Lantern is referencing Edgar Allan Poe with all that but what we see or seem is but a dream within a dream.
Mm-hmm.
That gets a little too Matrixy for me. My take on Matrix, the movie, was that, first of all, the second and the third one don't exist, and all that happened at the end of it was that he popped out of an inner loop to an outer loop that's still within the Matrix. But
I definitely began heavily influenced by the Matrix, and that was because not only the film was awesome, but when I started playing around with lucid dreaming, I just naturally, I wanted to kind of pretend to be like Neo. I wanted to do similar things. I wanted to try out similar things. So I was just very heavily influenced by that idea, but there were things that I think that film did that I wouldn't have done were it my story. So I kind of took it as a launching pad. I'm like, well, where would I go with it? When I wanted to write this story, I was always like, what's the story that I want to read, but I haven't written yet? So I'm not trying to retell the Matrix. I'm not trying to retell, I'm just like, parts of the Matrix that I like, and what parts of the Matrix would I have done differently? And then from that, go forward with the Lucent.
Now we've got just a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask the big, long question. It's going to take 3 hours to answer. But you've referenced this a couple of times about your experiments with lucid dreaming on your own.
Mm-hmm.
How does one try to even do that? I mean, because I go to sleep, I'm out. Do you have to go through some sort of self-hypnosis process before you go down so that you can recognize when you're in a dream? How do you? What goes through your mind to say, am I in a dream or am I not in a dream? For me, it's reading. If I can't read something, I'm in a dream.
Everyone's different. Let me preface what I'm about to say with this actually could potentially be spoilers for the book, but I'm just going to stick to talking about lucid dreaming. The way I see it is certain people are just more prone to it. Everyone's brain is wired slightly differently. Everyone sleeps slightly differently. Some people get sleep paralysis, some people don't, that sort of stuff. I always found it quite easy to recognize that I was dreaming, whatever it was. I would get recurring dreams. So I remember, hey, I've been here before. I've done this before. Oh, I'm back in that same dream. That would happen to me all the way back. I can remember dreams from when I was 2 or 3 years old. And that was a sort of always part of my life. I found that when I left school and started, you're a young man and you're staying up late at night and sleeping in, that was really inducive for lucid dreamings, particularly when I was about to wake up. Intense lucid dreaming. There are things you can do. There are techniques that you can do. You can go out and learn them to enhance them, to make it more likely that you're going to get them. Ever since I got a kid and started keeping regular hours, getting up early, it was over. was all over. I barely remember dreams anymore, unless they're really memorable. I barely know that I'm dreaming. I think it's all, you kind of if you're in a disturbed state, you're more prone to it. If I think there's some sort of, I don't know, I want to call it trauma, but something about sleep isn't working for you. I think you're more prone to it. I know people who've just lost loved ones, and they're not sleeping properly. They'll often experience, oh, my dad just died. He visited me in my bedroom. Usually what that is they're having a lucid dream. Incredibly real. People don't realize that about lucid dreams. They are incredibly real. A lot of the time, there's very little difference between reality and thing. Reading is one of them. That is a real thing. A lot of the times, you can't actually properly read in a dream. Your brain isn't just wired like that. Clocks as well. As well. They don't function properly in a lot of the dreams. All this stuff. I got so into this in the early 2000s. I actually learned a technique called wake-induced lucid dreaming, which is sort of more like meditating. You lie down fully conscious. You go through a process of sort of meditation in your mind where you put your body to sleep while your mind stays conscious. It takes a while to learn, to get used to it. But once you do it, it's like free hallucinations. You have an out of body experience. You kind of rise up out of your bed in a dream state. 100% real. The visual, the feeling, you can touch things, but you're in a dream. You can do crazy things. You can, I remember putting my hand through my other hand, going through a mirror and seeing what's on the other side, flying up around in the sky, all sorts of stuff. I jumped in front of a truck just to see what would happen, all sorts of stuff. And you can do this from a waking state. It's wild. I mean, it's actually called wild. It's called wake-induced lucid dreaming, but it is wild, real. It's crazy.
Is there any risk that you might think you're in a lucid dream after that and not be?
I thought about that because, sometimes I'd be walking around the street, conscious and thinking, God, imagine if I jumped in front of a truck right now. But no, you can tell, even though it is real. And when I say real, it is so real. You can tell because you can do strange things. I can, if I want to fly, I can just jump up and fly. If I, all sorts of things. So yeah, and again, I want to say everything that I'm discussing right now funnels directly into the influences that I had in writing the Lucent. So, if anyone wants to come back and listen to this in a few years and try and put the pieces together, I think that this would be really helpful because all of this feeds into kind of how the world that I've built works and functions.
Very, very cool. So when are you going to launch the next book?
I don't know. I don't know. I've kind of been distracted by a whole bunch of other things, namely coloring Replicator, just doing some other things, getting my life on track, my home life and my work life on track so that I can actually focus on getting back into it. The vast majority of it is already drawn. A lot of it is already colored, although I will need to revisit those colors. The thing is, I ran into complications because I'm not full-time on this. I do have a day job. I just ran into complications in getting the book out, and it came out a lot later than I'd hoped. Going forward, I think I'm going to work on a lot more of the book before I launch this time round, just so I'm so much more confident that I'll be able to get it out, within 6 months of the campaign. But as soon as I know, everyone will know. I'll be telling everyone we're launching on this date. But until then, I'm kind of being very hush about it because I don't want to make promises again that I can't keep.
That's the lesson that everybody learns after their first campaign. I think everyone goes in and learns a lot about. Oh, I didn't think of this or that. I learned something new with every campaign we fulfill with the logistics service. So it's constantly learning. Michael, thank you so much for coming on our show tonight and talking about this. This has been a fascinating discussion about more than just, I draw comics. And I love those kind of conversations when we get to have them. Folks in the chat, thank you so much for showing up. We don't have a show without you. Do hit the link for the auction. Check it out. There'll be something over there that you're going to want. And, of course, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night, everybody.